Welcome to What Retirement Means to You. My name is Cynthia DeFazio, and I'm joined today by Jerry Means of the Means Financial Group. Jerry, how are you today?
I'm doing fantastic, Cynthia. I'm excited to be here.
I'm excited to be in the studio with you because obviously I know that you've been so incredibly busy. You're helping people in your area retire with confidence, retire comfortably. So I have to ask you, what types of questions are people coming in with?
Well, I think people are mainly concerned right now with the market volatility. You know, they're wondering, how safe am I going to be in my retirement? If they're withdrawing funds, they're wondering, am I going to have to withdraw funds while the market is down? And that comes back to having a good retirement plan and being able to establish different buckets and have an income bucket that you can pull assets from to live off of that aren't affected by the market. So I think it's really important to segregate things.
Sure. What are some safe alternatives for people that are maybe a little nervous about the stock market?
Well, traditionally, people would have a 60-40 portfolio, meaning they would have 60% in stocks, 40% in bonds. The more they got closer to retirement, they would transition into bonds, and there's still target date funds that do that today. However, we're in a really awkward time in the world right now where the stock market has hit all-time highs, and we're seeing volatility, and bonds aren't as safe as they used to be because as interest rates are going up, current bond values are going down. So while people are switching over to bonds to get that safety, they're not as safe as they used to be.
That makes sense. And what about annuities? Where do those fall?
So there's different types of annuities. You've got traditional fixed annuities, which we are seeing rate increases, where you can get a fixed interest rate, sort of like a CD, for a certain period of years, a 3-year or 5-year increment, and they tend to pay 2 to 3% higher than what the banks are offering. Then we have fixed indexed annuities. So these are for people that aren't wanting to settle for that 2 or 3 or 4% returns. They're wanting a little bit more upside, but they're nervous about the market. Sometimes when I'm talking with clients, I call it playing the stock market for scaredy cats.
Okay.
Right? So maybe the market goes up 20%. You're only going to make 12 to 15% in that type of vehicle. But when the market goes down, there's a floor. You're going to make a 0 return. So you don't make anything, but you didn't lose anything.
Okay, all right, that makes sense. I should ask you a question. How does someone know that they're ready to retire, Jerry?
Well, again, I think that comes to sitting down and really doing a strategy. Often clients will come into the office, and or potential clients, and that's what they want to know. You know, I'll sit down, I'll do my questionnaire, and ask them, when do you plan to retire? And they say, that's why I'm here, right?
Right.
Because they've maybe met with an accumulation advisor, because there's really 3 phases of money: accumulation, preservation, and distribution. Those accumulation years are, you know, while you're working, you're putting money probably in your 401k, and you're getting that matching. And the market's going up and down, but you're dollar cost averaging in, you're putting money in every month. So if the market fluctuates, it's not a big deal because you have plenty of time for that. But the closer you get to retirement, you kind of enter that preservation and distribution phase, right? Well, now you want to hold on to what you've earned. You still want to keep up with inflation. You want to get a decent rate of return, but you don't want to see that money disappear 2 or 3 years before you retire or right in the beginning of your retirement.
Sure, that makes sense. How does someone know if they're taking too much risk?
So again, it comes back to doing a review and looking at and making sure they're not taking unnecessary risk. I think it's important to have a growth aspect of your portfolio. We often talk about buckets, right? We use the 3 buckets. You've got the bank bucket, that's your cash or your emergency fund. And we used to tell people to keep about 6 months worth of their bills in there, you know, to be secure. After the pandemic, we've kind of found that people are more comfortable having 8 to 12 months sitting in that bank bucket. Then we have the income bucket. This is where we have your Social Security, any pensions, things like annuities to guarantee income. And that 3rd bucket is that growth bucket. And it's okay to have risk in that bucket because you've secured your income with those first 2 buckets. And if the market's going up and down, you don't have to do a fire sale on your investments to pull it out to use it for income.
Absolutely. Well, Jerry, I should ask you, why do you have such a passion for helping others retire comfortably? Where does your drive come from?
Well, it really started when I was young. I don't think anyone grows up thinking they're going to be a financial advisor. It's just not something that, you know, everyone wants to be a police officer or a baseball player. or a fireman, things like that. You don't really say, hey, I'm going to be a financial advisor when I get older. But my grandfather was a big influence in my life. He was a great businessman. He was a World War II veteran, lived through the Great Depression. And he was the first one that really taught me about paying yourself first, taking 10% of your income and setting it aside for yourself in retirement, and that you couldn't start early enough. And his retirement was a lot different than the retirements that we're seeing today. But he taught me at 13 years old how to read the Wall Street Journal.
Wow.
I mean, how many kids are learning to read the Wall Street Journal at 13?
Not many.
But I thought it was interesting, so I thought my grandfather was interesting. And so I took notice of the things he was doing at a very early age. And so it kind of catapulted me into working in the retirement market. So I'm a financial advisor. I'm licensed to sell all products or offer all plans to all people. But I've decided to focus my business on those people who are 50 and over, that are nearing that retirement or in that financial red zone, or who are already retired and they're trying to make their money last.
Okay, excellent. I should ask you, how long does it take for you when you're having your first consultation to assess someone's overall needs?
So sometimes people come in and they just have a few basic questions that they want answered. And I'm glad to help them with that. Maybe I get up on the whiteboard and I draw some things out and just answer simple questions. Or maybe they're not a right fit and I have to refer them out to someone that's, better for their situation. But most times it lasts about 30 to 40 minutes. And I don't like to call it an appointment. I like to call it a visit. We're going to sit down, we're going to have a cup of coffee, and we're going to talk about what retirement looks like to them, or what it means to them, pun intended. So,
absolutely.
What does it mean to you? Some people say, well, I want to travel. Well, what does that mean? Do you want to travel to Europe twice a year, or is traveling to you taking the grandkids to Disneyland? What does the retirement mean to you? So I like to get to know the person and about their family. And then, of course, we got to look at assets and design a plan.
If there's a husband and a wife together right now in the viewing audience, how important is it that they come into the first consultation together?
I think it's very important because, we've tried it with just one of the couples come in, and they're trying to go home and re-explain everything. And it's just not the same as the experience of being in the office together and bouncing ideas off of each other along with me. So I think it's very important to have both people in the meeting.
Absolutely. Well, Jerry, I know you have a very special offer to present to the viewers at home today. Let's talk about what that is before we open the phone lines.
Okay. So today what we're offering is our on-track review, and we're offering that for the first 10 callers. And what we will do is if you come in, we will have that visit. We'll talk about what's important to you and what your concerns are. And then if you decide you want to move to the next appointment, we will do a full analysis for you. We're going to look at what is the risk in your portfolio, what are the fees that you're paying. We want to make sure that you have a long-term care plan, and most importantly, an income plan for that longevity. So if you give us a call, we'll make sure that we sit down with you and we go over those things.
Jerry, thank you so much. To the viewers at home, the phone number to call is on your screen. That number is 844-878-1293. We know you have a lot of questions for Jerry about how to plan your perfect retirement. He has the answers for you. All you have to do is take advantage of picking up the phone and calling in today. Again, the number is 844-878-1293. We're going to take a very short commercial break, but when we come back, I'm going to talk to Jerry a little bit more in detail about annuities and why they sometimes have a negative stereotype. Stay tuned.
How confident are you in your current financial plan? Do you know with certainty how the recent market volatility will affect your future hopes and dreams? How much are you paying in taxes? And how much are you losing to unnecessary high fees? You didn't work to save this money so that you could spend your time worried in retirement. Now is the time to take charge of your finances so you can feel confident about your future. Call in during the next 30 minutes of today's show only to set up an absolutely complimentary, no obligation, full-blown financial review that will result in your own customized written plan that we're giving away complimentary to the first 10 people who respond. We'll start with a full-blown analysis of what you already have by running a report to untangle how much you are currently paying in fees, how you're allocated for risk, and what it's costing to work with your current advisor. Next, we'll identify your goals. Where do you see yourself in the next 5 years? Where do you want to go, and who do you hope to go there with? Is your current financial plan set up to get you there without mishap? Let's design a roadmap to create a financial plan you can follow with confidence. Get the piece that so many people are missing from their retirement. Find out how having a written plan can make a difference to your retirement dreams. Call now to schedule your complimentary, no-obligation, full-blown financial review today.
And welcome back to What Retirement Means to You. My name is Cynthia DeFazio, and I'm joined today by Jerry Means of Means Financial Group. Jerry, a wonderful show we're having today, talking about such an important topic, of course, planning properly for retirement. I'd love to talk to you in this segment about annuities, because it seems like they have all kinds of different emotions involved, because people either love them or they hate them or they really don't know why. So let's talk about the different types of annuities right out of the gate.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, if you go into a crowded room and you say annuities, you're going to get different types of responses. You're going to get some people that say, oh, I love annuities. You're going to have some that maybe have a negative thought about annuities, or maybe they've heard stories and they're just not really sure what they think about annuities. So it's important to get educated, because there are different types of annuities for different situations. Basically, there's three types of annuities. You've got the fixed annuity, which is a fixed rate for a guaranteed period of time. There's no risk involved, and there's usually no fees. The second is a fixed indexed annuity. So a fixed index annuity is tax deferred. Just all annuities are tax deferred, but you grow the money and you draw income at a certain period when you're ready to retire, or whatever income that's needed for. But there's no risk involved. So you get some of the upside of the market with none of the downside risk. Then you have that third bucket, or that third annuity. That third annuity is a variable annuity. Now, a variable annuity is a lot different than the first two, because it is linked, it is in the market. So you have mutual fund costs there. You have mortality and expense fees. So a lot of times someone will sit down with me and they'll say, I have an annuity, but I'm not sure what I'm paying in fees. And I'll take a look and I'll see that they own a variable annuity. And I'll ask, what do you think the fees are inside this annuity? And they'll say, oh, 1 to 2%. And it's not uncommon for me to call the carrier. I don't call their advisor because that's awkward.
Yeah.
But I'll call the insurance carrier, and I know the questions to ask. And I'll ask, what are some of these fees? And it's not uncommon to uncover 3 to 4% in fees. And I always get a raised eyebrow from my clients when we do that. And a lot of times I think that's where the bad impression of the annuities come from, because people don't understand the fees, they don't understand the risk involved, but they kind of throw the baby out with the bathwater. And they say all annuities are bad. But what's really happening is they've been put into an annuity that probably wasn't appropriate for their situation or for their age.
Okay, okay. Do they belong in everyone's portfolio?
There's no one vehicle that's appropriate for everyone.
Okay.
But again, I work in the retirement market, so I'm working with people 50 and over. So getting that guaranteed rate of return, getting some of that upside with none of the downside risk, I think for most retirees, there's a place for a portion of that in their portfolio. It's not an answer to everything, but think of it as another asset class, right? We know we have stocks and bonds and mutual funds and ETFs, and everyone thinks it's a great idea to diversify, but they forget about annuities. It's just another asset class.
Okay, all right. Let's talk a little bit about bonds, if we could, for just a moment, because obviously we mentioned in our first segment that typically was a safe vehicle of choice, if you will. But why is that not such a great idea right now, especially like the 60-40 portfolio, if you will? Okay.
So the easiest way that I can explain that is on the playground when we were growing up, there were seesaws, right? You sit on one side, your friend sits on the other, and they would kind of go up and down balanced on the weight. It's the same thing with bonds and interest rates. If you buy a bond for $1,000 and you're getting a 3% interest rate and it's going to mature in 3 years, that bond value can fluctuate, but as long as that company is still, in business 3 years from now, you're going to get your money back, plus you got that 3% yield. However, if interest rates are going up and all of a sudden you need to sell your bond before the end of that term, and you can buy a $1,000 bond paying a 4% interest rate, who wants your 3% bond?
That's true.
You can sell it, but you're going to have to sell it at a discount. Now, as interest rates are going down, bond values will go up, just like the seesaw. So for the last 18 to 20 years, interest rates have been on the decline. So we've been in a bond bull market. The bonds have done very, very well. So that 60-40 portfolio worked. But now, like I said in the first segment, stock market's at all-time highs. We're starting to see that pullback. But also, you can't just jump in bonds, because as interest rates are going up, the bond values are going down. So it's time to look at alternatives. So it's a very interesting time in the market. And if you're retired, it's making planning more difficult, to be honest. So you really have to sit down and make sure you have all the pieces of the puzzle together.
Sure, that makes sense. And that also like correlate with the 4% rule. Is that still accurate, Jerry? Do people follow the 4% rule?
Well, there's lots of studies that say that that's not going to work. And the truth is, it works until it doesn't. So there's examples. If you would have retired in 1990, and you pulled 4% of your portfolio out, and you were, let's use the Dow, for example, and you were in the Dow Jones Industrial Average, and you were pulling 4% of your portfolio out, at the end, at the year 2000, you actually had more money in your portfolio than you started with. So the 4% rule worked. However, if you had that exact same plan, and you retired in 2000 when we had the dot-com bubble burst, right? And then we had the 2008 financial crisis.
Yep.
And then we had a slow recovery. By 2010, that 10-year period, you're actually almost out of money.
Wow.
So, we call that systematic rate of return risk. So it really depends on, what kind of returns are going to come in the market as you're retiring. And that's why you shouldn't depend on that. You should have a strategy that sets your income plan aside from the biggest casino in the world, which is the stock market.
Right. And I should ask you as well, someone's risk tolerance, does that ever correlate with their age?
It does sometimes. Theoretically, as people get older, they get more conservative. It's not always the case. I mean, I do have clients come in and they want to be a little bit more aggressive. But 90% of my clientele are conservative or moderately conservative investors. Again, I use the football analogy. If you're winning the game in the fourth quarter, it's okay to take a knee, right? And let the score be where it is.
Sure.
And so a lot of times people get almost to retirement, but they just want to make that much more, so they take too much risk, and then we get a pullback, and next thing you know, the retirement is pushed off another year or two or 3 years. And that can make a big difference, right? Those are 3 years that you could enjoy with your family or enjoy traveling or pursuing your dreams.
Absolutely. Jerry, is there a proper time to start planning for retirement? What is your advice on that?
Well, I think, like my grandfather taught me, the earlier you start, the better. But I think once you get to that retirement red zone, you're 5 to 10 years before retirement, you need to start looking at the preservation and distribution of your assets. Accumulation is always going to be important, but you need more of an emphasis on preservation and distribution at that point. And I find that with a lot of people, that's why they come to see me. They've been with an accumulation advisor, or they've had their money in a 401k and they've just kind of been throwing it at the market over time, or maybe even do-it-yourselfers. We've had a 13-year bull market, so a lot of do-it-yourselfers did great, and now they're seeing volatility. And so, Warren Buffett has a saying that says, when the tide goes down, we see who's wearing a swimsuit, right? So right now, the tide is going out, and people are saying, hey, maybe I'm not as good at this as I thought I was, and I might need to structure my plan a little bit more carefully.
Absolutely. Is that still the number one fear that people have entering retirement, that they could run out of money?
Yeah, I would say that's the number one fear. Running out of money, and then of course being a burden on their children. So we always try to address the long-term care plan as well.
Absolutely. Well, Jerry, I know you have a very special offer to present to the viewers at home today. Let's talk about what that is before we reopen the phone lines.
Okay. So today what we're offering is a complimentary consultation. We call it the On-Track Review. And if you come into our office, we're going to have a visit. And we're offering that to the first 10 callers. So if you come into the office, we're going to have a visit. We're going to talk about what your concerns are, what your retirement plan, or what you're wanting to do in retirement, and then we're going to design a plan around that. And we do that complimentary. So just give us a call, first 10 callers, be glad to meet with you.
Jerry, thank you so much. To the viewers at home, the phone number to call is on your screen. That number is 844-878-1293. We know you have a lot of questions for Jerry about how to plan your perfect retirement. He has the answers for you. All you have to do is call in today, 844-878-1293. We'll be right back after this very short commercial break.
As a good saver, you've been putting away money during your working years. Studies find that the biggest fear of retirees is running out of money. Market volatility isn't just the downward movement of stock prices, it's the size and frequency of change. The more dramatic the ups and downs, the higher the volatility. This can put savers who are newly retired or a few years away from being retired at greater risk. Today's generation of retirees is not receiving traditional pensions as our parents or grandparents did. Instead, we have retirement accounts such as 401ks or 403bs. These accounts typically expose your money to market risk. The last thing you want right before retirement is to lose a portion of the money you need for income. But how do you turn these accounts into a retirement income? Is it safe to keep all your retirement money sitting in the stock market? The last thing you want is to lose a portion of the money you need for income due to market loss. By working with a financial professional, you can learn how to turn a portion of your savings into an income stream for life and income for the life of your spouse if you're married. We all have moments in our lives when we wish we had taken action sooner. Don't let procrastination reign on your retirement parade. Act now before it's too late. Please call our office to set up your no-cost, no-obligation retirement income review today.
And welcome back to What Retirement Means to You. My name is Cynthia DeFazio, and I'm joined today by Jerry Means of Means Financial Group. Jerry, a great show we're having today, talking about the importance of planning properly for retirement. In this segment, I'd like to ask you, if we have people in the viewing audience today, let's say they're about 10 years away from retirement, what should they be thinking about right now?
Well, I think the first thing is just to do a total assessment of their current assets and their debt and try to put together a budget of what they feel like they're going to need in retirement. You know, often people will come in and say, Jerry, can I retire? That's why I'm here. And I start asking questions, how much are you going to need in retirement? Have you done a budget sheet? And they can't give me a number. Well, it's really hard to tell you if you're going to be able to retire if we don't know how much income that you're going to need.
Yeah.
So again, it always comes back to that income plan. You know, how much income do you need? What's going to be your shortfall or the gap? So if you need $80,000 a year in income during retirement, and between Social Security and pensions, you have $50,000 a year coming in, you have a $30,000 a year gap. And then, of course, we have to factor in for inflation, because if you're going to be retired, not only for 10 years, but now people are being retired for 20 years, maybe even 30 years in retirement. They may see things double twice in prices. You know, a gallon of milk may cost $8 one day. Right? So if your Social Security and your pension's not keeping up with that, that's more that you're going to have to pull out of your assets to supplement for that inflation. So I think understanding how much you're going to need in retirement, talking that through with an advisor, and that's what we try to help people do, and kind of get that number. What are we going to need? And then let's project it out with inflation and figure out how we're going to design that income plan around that income gap.
And how important is it to pay down debt prior to retirement?
Well, I think it's very important because, again, the more payments that you have in retirement, the more that you're having to pull off of your assets. So if you can, ideally you want to go into retirement being debt-free. However, we have seen with the low interest rates, you know, over the last 10, 15 years, that some clients are still having mortgages in retirement. You know, they have a very, very low monthly payment. They have enough income to be able to pay for that. So it's not that you can't retire if your house isn't paid off, but ideally it's helpful if you don't have payments when you go into retirement.
Okay. Is it ever too late to get started on a plan for retirement, Jerry?
No, I don't think so. I think it's very important to sit down with someone and start laying it out, you know, and do some hypotheticals. We use a lot of software in our office, and we do what's called Monte Carlo simulation. So we want to look at what you're currently having and how your current plan will hold up based off past performance and the different life events that we've seen over the last 20 years. And we can kind of project out, okay, if some of these things happened again, how would your retirement last? How would it hold up? And then we can take those results and we can compare them to another plan. And sometimes we show people 2 or 3 different plans. We call it results and advanced planning. So we want to kind of look at 3 or 4 different scenarios and using different vehicles and different tools. And we want to look and see which one you're more comfortable with as a client. And we'll kind of help guide you. We'll help guide that ship.
Okay. Jerry, what does it feel like when someone comes into Means Financial Group for the very first time?
So when you come into the office, the first person that you're going to meet is our office administrator, Jen. And we get lots of compliments on Jen. She's very bubbly. You know, I like to call her the director of first impressions because she's a big smile when you walk in. I think that's important when you come into the office. We have a very laid-back environment. We'll go into our conference room, and again, we like to sit down, have a cup of coffee or some type of soft drink, and just talk and get to know one another. And I always like to answer questions like, you know, I let them know that this is a complimentary consultation, but often people want to know, well, if I work with you, how do you get paid, things like that. I'm an open book, so I answer any questions that people have about myself or my practice in that first meeting. And then I want to get to know them. Like I said, I want to know, what does your retirement look like to you? What does retirement mean to you? And then we get into the assets. Often people will come in and they want to start pushing me statements. That's important to have that information, but it's not as important as getting to know one another.
Absolutely. And so do you recommend that people bring in anything to that first meeting? Do they have to bring in their statements?
They absolutely do not have to, because
Okay.
again, I want to get to know them, but it is very helpful to bring that information, because what will often happen in that meeting is they'll say, yeah, we would like to have another meeting and have you do some analysis, but they didn't bring their statements in, so they have to drop them back off or email them or so forth. So, you know, I always tell people, bring them, keep them in your purse or your suitcase or your folder, whatever you bring. If you decide to get those out during the meeting, then you can, but it's optional. I really just want to get to know you in that first meeting.
And then, Jerry, what does the second meeting look like?
So in the second meeting, I'm going to take all of the information they gave and I'm going to show them, okay, here's where you're at. I'm going to lay it out for them. Because often people don't realize, you know, I have 3 different IRAs. Those can be consolidated into one account, so it's easier to manage. You know, maybe they have a 401k and they're over age 59 and a half and they're still working, but they may not realize that there's something called an in-service rollover, where you can take your money while you're working in your 401k, roll it over to a traditional IRA, have an advisor manage it, and then still contribute to your 401k and get the matching if the company does that. And the reason that that is allowed is because most 401k or 403bs, they're very limited in their safe options, right? They have target date funds, which we have already discussed, are mostly bonds the closer you get to retirement, and bonds aren't as safe as they used to be. So by rolling it out into an IRA, we can use stocks, bonds, mutual funds, exchange-traded funds, annuities, lots of different tools. You know, and there's 16,000 mutual funds out there, right? But inside your 401k, you might only have 30 choices. So if you're 59 and a half, you should absolutely at least look at doing an in-service rollover. So we talk about that and what does that look like. And we want to look at what fees they're paying on their portfolio. We're going to go through and say, okay, you have this fund and this is the fee, but there's a fund that's doing the exact same thing or better for a lower fee. Doesn't it make sense to make a change there? So we can talk about different parts of their portfolio, and we're going to draw out that income plan. I'm going to lay it out for them.
Okay.
So.
Jerry, thank you for such an amazing episode this week. To our viewers at home, most specifically, thank you for spending time with us today. The number to call is 844-878-1293. Are you on the right path for retirement? And if not, wouldn't you want to know that today? Jerry is offering you the opportunity to come in to get to know him a little bit better. No obligation, completely complimentary. Again, 844-878-1293. Be safe, be happy, be blessed. See you next week.